Hello, welcome to another episode of Travelogue here on Sparks 1524. I'm Nathaniel Miller. Waterfalls are the stuff of legend, be it the great images of Niagara Falls cascading over the cliffs to the bottom, be it mythological tales such as in Korea, where waterfalls are formed over the pools where dragons make their home, and in Asia, many dragons are actually figures of wisdom and good fortune. Waterfalls capture our imagination. Well, one of the most famous waterfalls in America is actually one of the most hidden, Ruby Falls inside Lookout Mountain outside Chattanooga, Tennessee. Now, Lookout Mountain is a piece of ancient seabed. It's about 700,000 years old. I'm learning English this week. It and a few nearby formations are, like I said, they're ancient seabed that was compacted and compacted and compacted over millions of years. As the continents have shifted and North America moves across the surface of the earth, Lookout Mountain area was at once uplifted and eroded. The harder rock, the kind of rock that makes up Lookout Mountain, survived this erosion while most of the surrounding rock eroded away. So Lookout Mountain is 2,400 feet above sea level at its summit, but its prominence is about 1,600 feet. The difference here is that height above sea level is literally just that. If the ocean is here, Lookout Mountain is way up here. Prominence means Lookout Mountain's elevation above the surrounding landscape, and it's 1,600 feet above the surrounding landscape, which gives you an amazing view over 7 states on a good day from the very top. Lookout Mountain is most famous for the Civil War Battle of Lookout Mountain. In late 1863, the Confederates had driven Union forces into Chattanooga and laid siege to the city, threatening to destroy a major part of the Union Army. A certain General Grant, recently the hero of the capture of Vicksburg, was brought in to command the Union breakout. Grant's forces fought a series of battles, 3 of which are very prominent. One of them was taking Lookout Mountain from the Confederate forces. That's the Civil War side, and we will be exploring that in another travelogue. But today I want to get into the mountain, quite literally. Ruby Falls is not the most famous or the biggest waterfall in America, but it's probably part of the most famous love story of any waterfall in American history. Early in the 20th century, a young man named Leo Lambert, who was a chemist and a cave enthusiast, had fallen in love with a young lady named Ruby. Now, she and her family moved to Chattanooga, and Leo, love-struck, moved after them, courted, and married Ruby. Leo also believed that Lookout Mountain held the potential to be open to the public. There was a famous cave there, Lookout Cave, but its entrance had been sealed up because the railroad needed that area as a right-of-way for the railroad lines. Leo was certain there had to be something else there, so he scraped together the money, formed a company, and started drilling down. He intended to build an elevator shaft, and yes, he was actually thinking of an elevator back in the 1920s. He intended to sink an elevator shaft and open these caverns to the public, which would do 2 things: make him and Ruby a great deal of money, he hoped, while also in allowing him to control the flow of visitors and thereby preventing the caverns from being overrun and destroyed. It was actually pretty forward thinking. They started digging in 1928. 200 feet down, they came across a small shaft. When I say small, I mean we're talking 18 inches high. Now, I'm not an avid caver, but I have been caving, and 18 inches is nothing to sneeze at, but it's also not uncommon. There's a lot of passages where it gets small and you've got to just wiggle through. When they found that area, Leo and his team spent about 17 hours exploring through that shaft until it got bigger where they could stand up, and they kept exploring until they discovered an underground waterfall. Leo immediately named this waterfall Ruby Falls. Now this gets even cooler. As Leo and Leo and his team head back to the surface over 17 hours later, Ruby meets him, of course, and wonders, where have you been, Leo? He tells her what he's found. 3 days later, only 3 days later, Ruby accompanies Leo down the shaft through those crawl spaces to see the waterfalls he named after her. She was quite a woman. The elevator was sunk and built. The passages were opened up for easy, walking foot traffic. And Ruby Falls opened to the public in 1929, just in time to be wrecked by the Great Depression. Sadly, the Lambert's business went out of business, but he sold the property to another developer who saw the same potential. Today, Ruby Falls still operates and is open to the public for an admission fee, of course. You take a 400-foot ride down an elevator with a glass front so you can see the rocks sliding up in front of you. And there's a variety of tours you can take. The most common one, which is the one I took, and I took the same one 10 years ago. This was my second visit to the falls, is about a mile round trip. Now, walking half a mile one way and half a mile back doesn't sound like a lot, but you're in a cave. The floor is uneven. It's safe for walking, but it's a natural cave floor. If you're over about 5'6" in height, you're gonna have to watch your head. I'm 6'4". I spent a lot of the tour kind of walking like I did when I was back on a ship. There are some narrow passages where only one person can get through at a time, and because it is narrow, there are a few times where your tour group will stop to allow other tour groups to pass you on their way out. Ruby Falls Cavern, the whole system is a living cavern, and that means water is still flowing and still forming, evolving, eroding, and changing it. You will pass a number of formations that are spectacular, such as the Cactus and Candle, one of my favorites, the Steak and Potatoes. You'll pass flowstone, which is where water still drips down. It's still flowing and forming the stone. And you'll find a lot of what's called cave bacon. Guess why it's called cave bacon? One note of warning. There is a lot of places where the limestone is dry. It's not, there's not a whole lot happening. Those are places where the tour guides will tell you it's safe to put a hand, to lean against the wall if you need to rest for a minute. But the formations, do not touch the formations, please. It is very tempting because they're so close and they are beautiful. It is very tempting to want to touch them and just get a quick feel. This will destroy them faster than you think. Ruby Falls gets around 400,000 visitors a year. If every one of those visitors wanted just a quick touch of the Cactus and Candle, the abrasive action of the fingers on it, plus the interaction of the oils in our skin with the calcium carbonate that builds it, would destroy the formation within just a couple of years. So where does all this water come from? Ruby Falls is fed by rainwater that soaks into the ground of the mountain because it's a limestone mountain, which means it's porous. Water can soak in. As the water runs through, it erodes channels while also picking up minerals. These channels eventually become caves and caverns. The minerals will often be dropped off as the water drips and percolates, forming these magnificent formations. Ruby Falls itself is a 145-foot drop, and yes, it is a natural waterfall. There's still a legend that it's man-made. It's not. It's in a huge cavern that and our tour guide was telling us they believe the cavern itself was open to the size it is by tectonic activity, basically earthquakes, as the continental shelf, the continental plate that we're sitting on, moves and grinds slowly across the surface of the earth. But the waterfalls are real. The developers have used a variety of lights, obviously in the passages going to the falls, but they've also put a lot of artificial lighting around the falls just so you can see them. You're underground after all. There is a bit of showmanship here. Beautiful music is playing while you're down there. The lights shift in colors, which actually creates some very unique aspects on the falls. But the falls themselves are real, and whether you think the showmanship is cheesy or not, the falls are a magnificent natural wonder that was hidden under the feet of humanity for thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years. No human being ever saw them until 1928 when Leo Lambert and his team went through that little crawlway, started standing upright until he discovered the cavern with those waterfalls. Getting to Ruby Falls is pretty easy. It's right on the side of the mountain with a lot of signs. Ruby Falls, that way. It is a narrow area though. The roads are not, it's not like little one-lane mountain roads, but the roads are narrow, so drive carefully. The parking lot for Ruby Falls is the parking lot is across the street from the facility. But during the summer tourist season, Ruby Falls employs workers to stand out there and stop traffic at the crosswalk so guests can come to and fro to the parking lot. They do make visitors' safety a priority. Another thing to definitely do when you get to Ruby Falls, and your admission ticket for whatever tour you take will get you this, is go up to the top of the castle. The castle itself is a very neat story, and I talk a little more about it in my written blog, which is linked below. But the top of that castle is a lookout point, and you got a beautiful view over east over Tennessee and North Georgia. And if it's a good day, like when I was up there, it's spectacular. The only view on Lookout Mountain better than on top of that castle is at the very top of the mountain, which will be another travel log in a couple of weeks. If you have any interest in caves and caverns, any interest in waterfalls, any interest in seeing the site of one of the most unique love stories in American history, Ruby Falls is definitely a place to visit. They do have more extensive tour packages available. The basic one that I took I said it's about a mile round trip. It took about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours at the max. Other tour packages will take longer tours, be a little more extensive. There are other activities, of course, that have grown up in the area, such as the zip line. And it's kind of fun when you're up on the castle tower looking over Tennessee and Georgia, turn around behind you and watch people zoop, zoop, zoop back and forth. I hope you've enjoyed this brief tour of Ruby Falls. It is definitely a hidden gem. And the love story of Leo and Ruby is remarkable. They stayed together over 34 years. Leo finally died in 1950 and Ruby in 1951. You will fall in love with Ruby Falls if you take the time to go explore. Again, if you care to read more about this, my written column is linked below in the description. Also, if you're curious about Ruby Falls, its attractions, its pricing, and everything, I have linked their website down below in the description. If you're in Chattanooga, check them out. Chattanooga is not just Civil War history and some great art museums, and one of the greatest aquariums in the country, in my opinion. Chattanooga's also got a lot of outdoor adventures, of which Ruby Falls is one of my favorites. Thank you for your time. If you didn't enjoy this video, but you stuck with me, I appreciate it. Please feel free to hit that little like button, and feel free to share this video if you think other people would find it entertaining. Until next time here on Sparks 1524, always remember, go and do great things.